That we were here in this town hall just 3 years ago, launching our 2017 campaign. Now, if you told me then that our launch in 2020 would be in the midst of a global pandemic, I would have found that very hard to fathom. If you'd told me that Clark and I would by now have a toddler, I wouldn't have believed we would be so lucky. And if you told me that we would have just completed a term in government with both New Zealand First and the Greens, I'd assume you'd been watching excessive amounts of Stranger Things on Netflix. And yet, here we are. We came in on a platform of change and a commitment to tackle our long-term challenges, and that is what we have done. Fewer children live in poverty. More homes are being built. We're closer to making our country clean, green and carbon neutral. But there is much more to do. Now, more than ever, is the time to keep going, to keep working, to do more for our people and their well-being, for our small businesses, for our economy and for our recovery, to grab hold of the opportunities that lie in front of us. So let's keep going, let's keep rebuilding, and let's keep moving. After 102 days, we have our first cases of COVID-19 outside of a managed isolation or quarantine facility in New Zealand.
We actually have 4 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in one family, acquired from an unknown source. The first case to present was a person in their 50s who lives in South Auckland. That person was swabbed yesterday when they presented to their general practitioner with symptoms. That test was processed twice and returned positive, and a second swab today also returned a positive result. Importantly, the person has no history of overseas travel, and as per our usual protocol, we work very closely with Auckland Regional Public Health to interview the person. We've sprung into action, and in fact all those family members residing in the same household, there were another 6, were all tested, and 3 of the 6 have returned positive test results. The other 3 were negative.
As of 12 noon tomorrow, Wednesday, August 12th, we will be moving Auckland to level 3 restrictions for a period of 3 days until midnight on Friday. As we all learnt from our first experience with COVID, once you identify a cluster, it grows before it slows. We should expect that to be the case here. The fact that we are in level 3 in Auckland is giving us a helping hand. It means that when we are contacting people, they of course are already observing restrictions that limit the spread of the virus. Finally, I acknowledge the anxiety of some New Zealanders as we are moving at pace to stamp out COVID in our community and protect the health of all New Zealanders. But the pace and the speed should also act as an extra layer of reassurance. Within 6 hours of this case and notification amongst health officials, we were informing people of the need to move alert levels, and in less than 24 hours, Auckland was at level 3. In Hong Kong, Vietnam and Victoria, which are all managing the re-emergence of COVID, They in some cases waited 3 to 4 weeks before implementing restrictions similar to ours. Going hard and early is still the best course of action, and we all have a part to play in that. But once again, we are reminded of how tricky this virus is and how easily it can spread. But we know that limiting people-to-people contact really helps stop the spread. We have a plan, we have acted quickly, and now we'll continue to roll out that plan. I think probably in any circumstances misinformation is concerning. I do think, though, the vast majority of New Zealanders absolutely understand why we're taking the measures that we are. The whole intent is for us to limit the amount of time that anyone has restrictions on them and limit the amount of time that anyone has their freedoms limited. The whole goal is to get us back to normal as quickly as we can. It's not new. Some of those conspiracy theories around COVID-19 not being real have existed from the very beginning of COVID-19's emergence globally. Some of them are perpetuated by offshore sources. You see some of the people spreading that misinformation are from outside of New Zealand. What I would say is that, I've seen reports of people overseas who have viewed COVID-19 as being fake, who have lost their lives to it. And so, that's the evidence. The global situation is the evidence that this is very, very real. We need to take it seriously. And if you're someone that views politicians suspiciously, then please, by all means, listen to the independent doctors, scientists, those who are our source of advice that we lean on. You'll recall that it was actually on the day that there was a change in national leadership from Todd Muller to Judith Collins that I first stood in front of you and talked about our resurgence plan and why it was necessary. The idea that we would keep information back from the public when that is critical to us being able to look after their health and therefore their financial well-being and their jobs, the idea that we would ever do that is just nonsense. And that's the last I'm going to say on it. Yep.
In her hands, she took the challenge, answered our call.
I do think that, if I could ask the energy of the opposition to be channeled into anything right now, it would be supporting New Zealand's overall response to this resurgence, because the sooner that we can get on top of it, the sooner that we can ensure the security of people's incomes, their health, their livelihoods, and then after that, of course, enables us to hold safely elections. So that is where I would ask them to put their energy right now, because that's what New Zealand needs.
Put a woman in charge. Put a woman in charge.
Parliament dissolving does mean that if we needed to convene Parliament for any reason, we wouldn't be able to do so. We've therefore decided it would be prudent to defer the dissolution of Parliament by at least a few days to preserve all options for, if needed, reconvening Parliament, or if needed for the purposes of the date of the general election.
The news comes a day after Adern announced that a family cluster of 4 cases had been detected in Auckland, New Zealand's largest city. They were the first cases reported in the country in just over 100 days. On Wednesday, there were lines outside the city's supermarkets and coronavirus test centers as Auckland moved back into a so-called level 3 lockdown. That only allows for essential trips outside the home. The rest of the country has been placed under slightly looser level 2 restrictions as authorities scramble to trace the source of the latest infection. The family had not traveled overseas and is in strict isolation at home. The one woman had traveled while she was symptomatic to tourist spots in Rotorua on the country's North Island. Officials say they're investigating the possibility the virus was reintroduced on the surface of cargo brought in from overseas.
Turned upside down. Yes, she's a mother, partner, daughter.
I do think that, if I could ask the energy of the opposition to be channeled into anything right now, it would be supporting New Zealand's overall response to this resurgence, because the sooner that we can get on top of it, the sooner that we can ensure the security of people's...
Wishes they were in her hands.
When the pandemic began, world leaders took several different approaches to dealing with the coronavirus. Some were more successful and others less so. In this weekend's edition of London Calling, CBS contributor Simon Bates looks at how the differences are leading some people to question their leaders. And as always, Simon's opinions are his own, not necessarily reflective of CBSN.
I've talked before about the wistful way that many Brits look at this lady, Jacinda Adern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Her success in practically eliminating the virus from the country has been greatly admired here, where we wonder if she can be so quick-thinking in handling this crisis, why can't the British government act the same? And for the future, this could pay off big time for Scotland's First Minister, because Nicola Sturgeon is a strong campaigner for Scottish independence from the rest of the United Kingdom. Leading the attack on the virus in Scotland has been her biggest test yet, and increasingly many are concluding that she's proved herself to be an effective leader during this crisis. Mind you, it's not all plain sailing, of course it never is. There are deep splits in her Scottish National Party, which might rise to the surface soon, and this week she's been involved in a row about exam grades in Scotland's schools. Still, her communication skills are a great contrast to the bluster and frequently contradictory messages from London, so maybe the likes of Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, as well as Jacinda Adern in New Zealand, are proof that there's a new generation of highly successful female politicians who tell it like it is. That's London Calling for today. This is Simon Bates for CBS News in Devon.